What's up, pet people? My name's Lexia and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be doing something similar to some videos I did in the past. And today we're going to be going over 5 common snake illnesses. Now, I have personally never dealt with any of these illnesses that I'm going to be listing. Thankfully, my snakes have been healthy all throughout their time I've had them. I'm just going to be going over things that I have looked up, researched, talked to other snake owners, one in particular at my work, other snake owners about, and just kind of gone through and learned about as precautionary details. But once again, none of my snakes have actually had any of these illnesses. So that said, we're going to get right into today's video. Right into today's video, quick little overview. I'm going to tell you the illness, tell you the causes, the symptoms, how to treat it, and then also show you a picture of said illness. If you are not comfortable with seeing pictures of sick animals, I suggest that you do not watch this video, but it is good to know what to look for whenever you are talking about these certain illnesses and or diseases. I kind of like group them all together. Anyway, getting right into today's video, as I was saying, first things first, in my opinion, one of the more common illnesses that we're going to talk about is an RI, which is a respiratory infection. Now, snakes can get respiratory infections from various things, as all these other mentioned diseases. There's not just like one set cause for this. That said, the most common cause of RIs are too high of humidity and having a very high stress level for that snake. So, poor husbandry, high humidity, not having the correct substrate and stuff can cause a respiratory infection in your snake. Some of the symptoms of that are loud breathing and or coughing, having gaping mouth. Whenever they open their mouth, you'll see kind of a mucousy substance between the top and bottom of the mouth. Kind of looks like clear snot. Only way I can describe it. You can notice that their heat pits, if it is a BP, or that their nose will have some like bubbles coming out of it. That's very concerning. Those are just some like of the more common symptoms of it. Obviously, lethargy, not eating, things like that are the like severe, not as noticeable if you don't constantly watch your snake. Those are the less noticeable symptoms. But going into how to treat an RI, you really cannot and should not try to treat a respiratory infection for a snake on your own. I recommend, and as does every website I've looked at, please take your snake to a vet. The only way to really treat a respiratory infection for them is to get antibiotics for them, and of course whenever you are treating any sick reptile of any kind, you need to quarantine them. So take them to the vet, get the antibiotics. Of course they're always pretty much for snakes an injection that you can do into the base of a tail. They'll give you needles and everything to deal with that on your own, but you need to make sure to quarantine them, put them on a dry paper towel substrate, and just watch them regularly, check humidity regularly, and pretty much monitor your snake up until the point in which they are healthy. Okay guys, so the next illness that I'm going to go over is probably the second most common for snakes, and that is snake mites. Snake mites are caused by snake mites. They're itty bitty bugs that slip between the scales and or the eyes or heat pits. They just are very bothersome for your snakes. They're, like I said, itty bitty little bugs, normally black, or there's some species, there's one in particular of mite that's red, and what they do is they slip between the scales and they suck your snake's blood. So the symptoms of snake mites, or things that you need to look out for, are excessively soaking in their water. If your snake doesn't normally have like a soaking dish, or if they aren't normally in their soaking dish and then all of a sudden they're soaking a whole lot, like constantly in their water, that's something you need to look out for. And if you're checking the water daily and refilling it or getting fresh water daily like you should, you definitely need to check in the water for little black dots or red dots floating around. That can be obvious signs that you have mites on your snake. Small dots on the skin that are moving, or around the eyes, if you notice slight swelling, those are some signs too. Specks around the, like little black dots around the sheds, if you notice their sheds, and they can have some black dots on them around the habitat. There can be a lot of little dots, raised or abnormal looking scales. Sometimes the scales can be a little hard looking. That could be because they're swollen, filled with blood, things like that. They could have a decrease in their appetite. And then last one that is like kind of easy to notice but not really, because snakes do this sometimes just when they're shedding, is if they're excessively rubbing on the edge of their habitat, or if you notice they're like rubbing on a rock or a branch that you have in there and they're just sitting there repeatedly going around and around trying to rub themselves on it. Those are symptoms that they're having irritation within their scales and that they could have mites. Now, there are a couple different treatments for snake mites. Of course, everyone has different things that they can say that you can do. One thing I do not recommend doing, just because it can hurt the snake, is using mineral oil. I see that a lot, and I'm actually going to do a video over why not to use mineral oil on your snake. But some people say use mineral oil to like drown the mites and suffocate them, but mineral oil is known for like tearing off, not tearing, like dissolving the scales and making them kind of rub off super easy, and that could actually put more damage on your snake and its scales. So instead of using mineral oil, I've seen a couple places, and one of my co-workers actually told me olive oil is super good for this. Just use, you know, extra virgin olive oil and kind of rub it on your snake. Obviously this is going to be super messy and you're going to have to rinse it off after, but leave the olive oil on there for about 10 to 15 minutes to kind of suffocate those mites, and then rinse them. You can do this 2 times a day for a week, I've read. And then there's also a betadine. It's a type of thing you can use for snakes. I don't know how, I think it's betadine. I'm going to spell it right here, but it's a treatment that you can mix with water and you just kind of soak them in that. And it's helpful for them to help, you know, pull the mites out and suffocate them as well. Of course, with mites, they are highly, what's the word? Contagious, pretty much. They're contagious. They move around a lot. If you have any if your enclosure is near another snake's enclosure, you need to clean both the enclosures and quarantine both your snakes. Of course, put them on a dry paper towel substrate so that you can see if there are mites on the paper towel and figure out how long you're dealing with this problem. Of course, if it gets too bad, please take them to a vet, but you need to completely clean the entire enclosure, sanitize the enclosure, sanitize the other enclosure, throw out all wood and or fake plants of any kind, because they can live in those and stay in those. Obviously, switch out the substrate completely. Basically, do like a super deep, you're just getting a brand new pet type of thing clean. Make sure that there's absolutely nothing left in the enclosure. If you had, like I said, your snake near another enclosure, or the enclosures next to each other, clean them both. Mites hop from enclosures sometimes, or if you take your snake out and it was like on your couch or something when it had mites, gotta clean your couch. Everything that the snake touched while it had mites, you need to clean and take care of and sanitize thoroughly to make sure that they do not get mites again. Mites are kind of a huge problem in the reptile community. I've personally never had snake mites. One way that is great to make sure you never have snake mites is don't ever put a snake right into a new enclosure without quarantining it right after you get it. Make sure to routinely check them while you're holding them. You should really be routinely holding your snake anyway, so it should be rather easy to check them if you're holding them regularly, and you can notice things quicker and easier. It's just, you kind of got to keep an eye out for that stuff. Make sure all your bedding is sealed up completely whenever you get it. Make sure you don't have like half open bedding that you got from like PetSmart or Petco or somewhere like that. Make sure everything's completely sealed. Don't be mixing bedding like from one enclosure to another. Be like, oh, it's still clean, I'll move it to this one. Don't do anything like that, please. For the love of God, just get new bedding. Make sure it's clean. Routinely clean your enclosures. Routinely check your reptiles. Do whatever is necessary to make sure that your reptile does not get mites. Okay, so next illness that we're going to talk about is scale rot. I have seen some terrible things about scale rot while I was researching it, actually. But scale rot is basically whenever you have too high of a humidity and your reptile just kind of sits there in that moisture and it gets between the scales, or you have too high of a temperature, or the cage is dirty, and all three of the things kind of combine. Now, obviously, high humidity, high temperature, dirty cage, that is a huge breeding ground for bacteria, and all scale rot is a really, really bad bacterial infection on your snake's scales. So it's obviously easy to prevent, but we'll get into that later. Anyway, scale rot, the symptoms and or signs to look for scale rot. If you hold your snake regularly, you should be able to notice this right away. But the signs and symptoms are swollen or pussy or red, like kind of oozy, discolored, gross looking scales. They could either be squishy or they could be hard. They are more often than not raised, and it just kind of looks like it's rotting from the edges to the center, obviously, because it is scale rot. So scale rot, once you get scale rot, you can fix it at home. If it's too bad, you need to go to a vet, or you could go to the vet right away and get a topical cream that you could put on it. I've read that most exotic animal vets will have a cream like this, but chances of you just taking them to your local vet who doesn't know a whole lot about snakes, they will pretty much tell you what I'm getting ready to tell you. So the first thing, obviously, you need to do, again, with any snake that is sick, this will be my third time saying it now, is please quarantine your snake. So what you're going to do is you're going to take them out of their enclosure, and you got it, put them on a dry paper towel substrate. Now, I don't know if I said this with the past ones, but you do need to clean out the paper towel substrate regularly, like daily, switch it out for clean paper towels. But you need to quarantine your snake, which means remove all the substrate, put in dry paper towels, or move them to a different enclosure until it's gone. You need to make sure to drop the humidity. Obviously, if it's detrimental to your snake, to drop the humidity to a certain degree, don't do that, but you also need to move them onto a dry surface and make sure that the substrate, the paper towels, are not damp and or wet at any times, because they need to allow them to dry out. Anyway, so you need to clean the affected scales with a diluted betadine solution. I talked about this kind of with the snake mites just recently, and what you need to do is you need to mix it a 3-to-1 solution. It's the exact same for if you were to soak them in it for snake mites, but 3 parts water to 1 part betadine, just because it is a very strong solution. So anyway, it is recommended to soak them between 5 to 10 minutes 2 times daily every day for anywhere from 7 to 10 days. I saw one website recommended 14 days. Obviously, if you have it under control within the 7, you can go to the 10. I wouldn't recommend going to the 14 if you have it under control in the 7, just because you don't want your snake to become reliant or to cause more damage by soaking them in something like a chemical that could eventually dry out their scales completely, and they might have problems shedding if you do it too much, is another thing I read. Anyway, so you soak them for you soak them twice daily for 5 to 10 minutes, 7 to 10 days, or 10 to 14, depending on how bad it is. And then once the scales dry out completely, you take them out, let them dry out completely. Use a triple antibiotic ointment. That's right, you can use Neosporin on your reptiles. It's actually recommended to use Neosporin for scale rot because it works great. It's been proven to work. But you use a triple antibiotic ointment on the affected scales because they will be pussy, they might be bloody, they could be really gross and, rotting. So the triple antibiotic ointment will kind of prevent that bacteria from coming back when it's sucked out by the betadine. Always double check the cage. Clean it regularly. That can prevent this. That's like the biggest thing to prevent this. Double check the humidity. Clean it regularly. Handle your reptiles regularly to be able to check them and kind of check them. I've said check them repeatedly like 8 times now, but handle your reptile regularly so that you can give them a nice little look over and make sure that nothing abnormal is going on. Okay guys, so illness number 4 that we're going to go over is eye infections, which are actually more common than you would think with snakes. The signs and symptoms of this are an infected eye, If you're wondering what that looks like, here you go. It can be cloudy, it could be a very obviously stuck eye cap, and most of the time that's what it's from, is a retained eye cap that has gotten bacteria under it or has irritated the eye in some way. It can also be caused by bumping the eye or scratching the eye in some way and bacteria getting in through that way. Since snakes, just like crested geckos, don't have eyelids or anything like that, they can't really shield their eyes and blink or do things to keep bacteria out. Unfortunately, unlike crested geckos, snakes can't like lick their eyes and clean them regularly, so it's more common for snakes to get something that bothers their eye or hits their eye if they're not careful than it would be for a crested gecko. Now moving on from that, some things that you could do for eye infections are you could get a eye treatment drop, just like with crested geckos. They have certain ones for snakes, and you could use that, you know, twice a day, daily for up to a week. If it still persists after that, please take your reptile to the vet. Eye infections are definitely something that you don't want to mess with. Retained eye caps, if you can't get them off yourself, please go to a vet. Don't pull on them. Don't risk hurting your snake's eye more. And just be very careful, because this is a serious thing that, just like I said with the crested gecko video, it could cause your reptile to be blind if it's not handled properly and quickly. The last and final sickness or disease that we're going to be talking about today is mouth rot. Mouth rot. And it's pretty much exactly like what it sounds like. Your snake's mouth will begin to rot. This can be caused by severe respiratory infections, actually, or it could be caused by improper humidity, same way scale rot can be, or it can be caused by abrasions within the mouth of your reptile. Some things to remember with mouth rot are you can't fix it, you have to take it to a vet. And mouth rot is incredibly dangerous because it can prevent your reptile from eating. So some things that may be signs of mouth rot are you will notice they don't want to eat. You will notice kind of a red little lining, or they will sit there with their mouth gaping again, kind of like with an RI. But the best thing to do in this scenario is not trying to fix it yourself, and instead just taking them to the vet to get it diagnosed and get the correct antibiotics for your reptile. Sometimes if it's too severe, they will have to cut out dead parts of tissue from your reptile's mouth to make it easier for them in the future, but it's something that you need to go to the vet for. Okay guys, so there you have it. 5 common or well-known snake illnesses and how to treat them if they can be treated by you. If you feel uncomfortable treating your snake or reptile, obviously we're going over snakes today, but if you at any point feel uncomfortable treating your animal on your own, please take it to a vet and get professional help. Not everything can be treated by you, and that is perfectly a-okay. Just be willing to admit that you had made a mistake and be willing to step up and care for your animal as properly needed. With all of my videos, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for, regularly coming to this channel and supporting me. I really am super thankful for all of you who have been here before. If you have not been here before and this is the first video of mine you have watched, please give that, subscribe button a little tippy tap, kind of like my dog's tippy taps as he was talking through. Please make sure to subscribe to me and give it a big thumbs up today. You watched the video all the way through, so you might as well give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you guys in next week's video, which I don't even know the date right now. Hope to see you guys in next week's video. I will have some super fun things planned for this month because it is the month of Halloween. So please stay tuned for all of that, and I hope you guys are safe and healthy and doing well. And thank you once again for all the support. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye!